Hello and welcome to another episode of FireDEV, a fireside chat with developers or people in the industry that developers will be interested in hearing from. And today I have my guest Evan Moss. Just want to thank you, Evan, for coming on the podcast today.
Of course. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So before we talk about Apple and all the other stuff that you're doing, so I just want to go right back. What was getting into Carnegie Mellon like? Such a prestigious university, and how was your experience there?
Man, it was a trip. I'd done a couple summer programs at Carnegie Mellon in high school, and so being able to go back, being able to go back as a freshman meant my first day on campus. I already had a bunch of friends. I knew a bunch of upperclassmen, and that really helped get me started on the right foot there. I loved Carnegie Mellon. I don't have anything bad to say. It's one of those institutions where it's not made for everybody because it is really hard, really difficult, and it takes a certain kind of person to want to deal with that kind of mental pain. But at the same time, I wouldn't ever choose to go anywhere else. I loved it.
Okay, that's good stuff. And like, what did you do in those programs that you mentioned? Before you actually started.
I went to the Summer Academy for Math and Science. So it was a program primarily for minority students, and their motto was making good students great or something like that.
Okay.
It was like a not so much a high school prep program, but it really strengthened my foundations in math and science, and also introduced me to a bunch of different engineering kind of engineering careers, engineering classes that I would not have been exposed to otherwise.
Okay, was that kind of like AP Maths or AP Chem that they have in America, or is it something different?
It's something different. AP Math, that's like a high school class. This was actually a 6 week program during the summertime. So for 6 weeks, I lived on campus in a dorm with other high school students. Our counselors, our floor counselors, were current Carnegie Mellon students. We took math classes, science classes. There was some SAT prep classes. Did they have SATs where you're from?
No, they don't, but they have similar stuff. I mean, everyone in the UK has heard about SATs just because, you know, media, so movies, TV shows, it's a big thing they talk about SATs. We do have something called SATs here, but it is different to, your SATs, even though, it's spelled effectively the same. So we
So
don't exactly have that.
it was a lot of SAT prep, and so it was a summer before my junior year and summer before my senior year in high school, and so um, my junior year I started, and like math and science I knew it already. I was very well adept, um, and yes, it really set me up to go to Carnegie Mellon to help me be ready for college.
Okay, that's good. I've just had a quick Google, so it's more the equivalent of what we have at it's A levels in this country, and that comes after high school from typically ages 16 to 18. Then from 18 onwards, you would do university, assuming you don't do any repeat or any gap years. So yeah, it's the equivalent of A levels. But I've always felt that when I've watched movies and they're talking about SAT, it just feels more intense over in America than A levels were here. Again, A levels weren't the easiest thing I remember, but again, I don't know if it's movies or TV shows. Like, how accurate is the SAT experience compared to how you see it in movies?
It's very real. I mean, I forget now, but I think it's something like a 4 hour test.
Gee, no,
Um,
yeah, ours is not like
it's
that.
yeah, it's crazy. It's very intense, and the tough part is a lot of colleges require it as an inch. Like if your SAT level isn't high enough, you don't even get considered. And so the intensity of it is thinking, holy crap, I got to sit here for 4 hours and be perfect on this test, and if I don't get a specific number, I can't go to college. That's
Yeah,
what it's like.
yeah, that's like the biggest difference I would say with the A levels and SATs. Is 1600 a perfect score with SATs?
I think 2200. There's when I took it, there were three. I remember right, there were 3 primary segments, and each segment was the maximum score was 800.
Okay. And is there just this one 4-hour test, or are there multiple for different subjects, or is it all kind of combined?
Nope, it's one 4-hour test that covers math, science, and language. So
Okay, yeah. So
the crazy part is most people only take the test once, maybe twice, and it's one of those things where yes, it evaluates your education, evaluates like what you know, but really there's some very basic kind of tricks and techniques that you can learn to doing the test, uh, such that all I got to do is tell you the strategy once, and your scores might go up 10%. And so one of the benefits of the summer program I went to is we took the test, I think, 6 times every summer. And so by the time I actually took it when it mattered, I was chilling because I had done it so much. I was used to it. I knew what to expect. But the people around me had no idea.
yeah, I think that's a huge part, especially with examinations. University, college, school, is that if you're doing it that one time, because it's not just the exam paper, it's that intensity of sitting in a hall in a room where you know it matters so much, you can't talk. Actually, I'm assuming you're allowed a toilet break in those 4 hours or not.
Yeah, there is a break at some point, but it's very brief. It's very
Yeah,
brief. It is
you can't talk with
very
each
simple.
other.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, I'm guessing you can't talk with each other during the break.
uh, I think you can, but I mean the break was really short. It wasn't like even if you could talk, it wasn't gonna matter. It wasn't gonna save you at that point.
Yeah, and probably that little break, people probably just wanted to go toilet, relieve themselves or grab a glass of water.
Yeah,
Like the last thing on their mind for those few minutes
yeah,
was, trying to figure out what this question was. Yeah, like the that's one of the things that I always recommend to people, because I've done tutoring before as well, is try and get in the flow of doing what you're going to be doing. So on the day, the questions are going to be somewhat alien to you.
yeah,
Even if you know the topics, the exact question you probably have not seen before. So, but try and remove the alien aspect of you're in a room, it's quiet, you cannot talk, and, at home, let's say if you do an hour and a half, 2 hour test or whatever it is, you might be tempted to take a 5 minute break, go to the toilet, grab a snack. You can't do that in an exam. So,
yeah,
try and make sure that you're not doing that, and just actually do it. And because I remember when I was doing my A levels at university, my degree as well, for the exams, what I would do, I would get past papers if I had access to them, and I would just emulate what you would do in an exam, like essentially what your summer course was, and I would do it. I would then grade myself because I had the mark schemes, but I would try and be strict. So if I got, let's say, 50-60%, I would try and figure out what I got wrong, do it again, do it multiple times to the point where I'm just like, this particular paper I've got nailed down, then just do more of these. I think that's definitely one of the best strategies. Obviously, you need the knowledge. You can't do that and then have no actual math skills
yeah.
to talk of. But outside of the skills, you need to be prepared for the format itself. And I think that's just life in general. It's like interviews. If you're not prepared for that format, you're going to struggle because it's going to be so alien. You're going to be just tensed up anyway.
Yep. What it does. My thought on this is control what you can and don't worry about what you can't.
Yeah.
And by that, it's like the more familiar you can be with the format of the test, or the more prepared you can be, the easier it is for you to just exist in the moment. And
Oh,
that's
yeah,
how
for sure.
you get the best. That's how you get the best results, in my experience.
Mm. Yeah, that thing that you just said a moment ago, that reminded me of a quote that goes, I can't remember who it was, but he said, I just think of, what I'm thinking about, what I'm worrying about. I just think, can I control it? If it's something that I have control over, I don't worry because I can control it. And if it's something I have no control over, then I don't worry because I can't control it. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's easier said than done. But if like say, if you try and practice that, you can't control, what grades you're gonna get because you could start thinking because it's not marked by a computer as far as I'm aware. It is, especially not in the UK. It's marked by humans. You don't know, and I've done marking before, so I know that just like they do it so quickly, so it's so easy for them to give a lower mark even though they deserved a higher mark, and you generally would never know. So that sort of stuff you just don't want to think about. You just want to think, okay, it is what it is. It's the same with like you having to be in a room. It is what it is. You can't be in a comfortable chair, in the right temperature that you like it, with some snacks that you want, and maybe someone there to support you. So if you can get used to that aspect, then when you get the exam, you're literally just concentrating on the exam and not the external environment.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I found a video of you at Carnegie from 12 years ago talking about, I think you know which one it is, talking
Yeah.
about SAMS. What is SAMS and how did that video come about?
SAMS is a summer program. SAMS is the abbreviation for Summer Academy for Math and Science.
You've already covered it.
Yeah, it's trippy just because that program really changed my life. Now most of my closest friends I met while at that program. Like my best friend, my best friend is there. A lot of my confidence as a person was really kind of started there. That program was the first time. It was the first time I was surrounded by other black kids that were smart.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of my public school experience prior to college, my grade school experience, was battling this idea that black kids aren't supposed to be smart. And that was perpetuated by teachers, that was perpetuated by black students, that was perpetuated by not black students. And so being a black guy and being smart made me an outsider in a lot of groups in high school. And so being able to leave my high school, the program was in the summertime, but being able to go to another city, live in a dorm, and just spend 6 weeks surrounded by about 100 other students that were all as smart, if not smarter than me, was really a life-changing experience. And so, like, I wouldn't have ended up at Carnegie Mellon if it wasn't for those programs. A lot of my closest friends, a lot of my closest relationships, I wouldn't have if it wasn't for that program. And it really jump started a lot of things for me. And so I think the decision to actually go to the program was one of the single most influential decisions I made in my whole life. So that video you were talking about, they asked me, the organizer of the program, well after the fact, asked me if I could say something about it, and I there's no way I could pass on an opportunity to rave about how amazing the SAMS program is.
Okay. And yeah, like, I remember, obviously I'm Asian, so I remember growing up, similar feelings that it's kind of weird when you was, intelligent, when you was doing well, and then I saw plenty of other Asians that weren't doing so well, and I don't believe they were inherently, stupid or anything. It's just the backgrounds they had come from, or what they had been taught and what they believed just meant they just weren't doing that well in their subjects. I remember when I was at school, because they had after school classes, and even just it was just during school, like a lunchtime and a break, they had extracurricular activities, and one of the ones was a chess club. And I went to the chess club, and I remember it's just all white people. I'm like the only Asian kid there, even though there were plenty of Asian kids at the school, plenty of black kids at the school as well. But those kids, if they did an extracurricular, it was usually sport related. They never did the maths or the science you want. Or I remember another one. It was, again, this doesn't really have anything to do with intelligence, but in terms of interest, they had a remote RC club. and you could take your own RC car, but they had stuff there as well. Now you just basically, after school, once the kids are gone, just literally outside, you would just race them. You just have some fun. And
Yeah.
the teacher that did in woodworking or metalworks, he was, in charge of that. And again, it was the same thing. I remember it was just all white kids. I'm the only Asian kid. And I remember one time some Asian kids that I knew, I think they had detention. So they had, stayed in school a little later than they usually would have done. They were
Yeah.
walking back home. They was near, going through school. And, they saw me, we was talking, and they was like, what's this? And it was like almost alien to them to do a class like that. But
Yeah.
if there was some sort of football class, they were more, likely to do that. Even though when they had a quick go at it, they loved it. Come on, anyone that's 14, 15-year-old, a boy, messing around with RC cars, you're going to enjoy it. You can't not. But it was just that mindset of it's not for me, or I won't be accepted. So it's a weird one.
A lot of it really comes down to exposure,
Mm.
and just it's hard to be when you think about chess. If you've never seen anybody play it, you don't have any idea about the intense level of strategy that goes into it. It's hard to appreciate the game. It doesn't have a fun score. It's not necessarily fast paced. It's not necessarily exciting to watch if you don't understand the rules. And so from that perspective, it's really hard. It's really hard to be excited about chess. I know I wasn't excited about chess until I saw some of my older cousins playing as a child. Um, your commentary brings me back. Another way of exemplifying this idea is through this experience I had well after I graduated college. I was living in Boston, Massachusetts, working. Um, and one of my coworkers asked if I would come. He said his sister was a teacher in a poor neighborhood in Boston, not a poor neighborhood, but like a not rich, we'll say not rich neighborhood in
Mhm.
Boston. And she asked if I would come and participate in a career day. As I said, of course. So I went and talked to something like 600 college students. This was a whole, not college students, 600 elementary school students. This was a whole day's worth of career fair type stuff. And it was classroom after classroom would come and go, and we do this panel. And in every class, we would ask, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And almost 100% of the students were Hispanic or Black. Almost 100% of the students said they wanted to be a nurse, they wanted to be a car technician. Um, there was a few others, but like nobody. It was always I want to be a car technician. It was never I want to be an engineer. It was
Yeah.
always I want to be a nurse. It was never I want to be a doctor. It
Mm.
was I want to be a teacher, right? It was never I want to be a professor. Um, and it would have been one thing if it was like one group of 20 or even a group of 50, but to think that this was true for an entire school of students was just one. It was bizarre to see firsthand, but also it really exemplified the significance of representation, but also of exposure. And so I think back to like the black kids I went to high school with. Uh, the majority of black kids, that like my black friends, they didn't come from homes where they saw people reading, where they saw people going to college, where they saw people as engineers. Me, on the other hand, my mom was a teacher, and I grew up seeing her have a deep appreciation for books, and so that's what ultimately spurred my love for reading, my love for education, just because I was exposed to it at home.
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar thing for me. I grew up with, my dad used to read, even if it wasn't books that I now would probably read, but I saw him, doing that, and I remember there were plenty of kids at school that that had friends. Again, it wasn't just Asian kids or black kids. I had plenty of white friends that grew up from, let's say, more broken households, and it was something that they would probably ridicule if read in their house, or play chess, or one of those things. So obviously it was, uh, they obviously built up like an armor around them. They was like, I don't want to do that because it's clearly, whether they think it's not manly enough, or they'll get ridiculed, whatever it is. They just didn't do those things. But because I didn't grow up around that, and I remember the area I lived in was predominantly, white. It was actually something that my dad really wanted, was because the Asian areas that were near us, where we grew up, they weren't the best areas as well. Because it wasn't just, oh, it was an Asian area. It was just, they just weren't the best areas because there were white people there. But it was just the good areas, or the better areas, were predominantly white, and he wanted us to live in those areas. And as a result, I didn't have that stigma, was that sort of mindset around doing or not doing certain things. Because I remember one of the things I love is video games. Being at university towards the start, and I am talking with some people about video games, some Asian guys that are in the same building as me, and we're just hanging out, we're playing. And I remember one of them gets, because they already knew each other, and I just met them at the, in those few days. And one of them gets a call, and the person who's calling is asking, what you doing, what you up to, when we're gonna hang out. And I remember he said, "Oh, we're just playing FIFA." And I remember one of the other guys was like, don't say that, it's embarrassing. I remember just thinking, for me, I would be like, yeah, I'm playing whatever I'm playing because I enjoy that. There was like no hiding that fact. And it was just, I see it all the time, even as adults. I see with people where they think they can't enjoy certain things, even though there's nothing wrong with them. It's almost like they're illegal or unethical, but they're not.
Yeah, it's foolish. It's foolish and unfortunate, but what can you do?
Yeah, it is one of those things. So I think you kind of probably alluded to this already, but would you recommend university to people, and why?
Hmm. It, no. Yes and
Okay.
yes. I honestly, I don't think university is for everybody. Um, I don't think you need I don't think you need a college degree to you don't need a college degree to be a plumber. I don't think you need a college degree like to be a trash man. You don't need a college degree to be a construction worker. But those are all jobs you can make. You can make a very healthy amount of money. Uh, you can live a very happy life with the amount of money that you can make with those jobs. You can be there's so many other options you can have for being able to live a fulfilling life without necessarily needing a college degree. And so I think for my own aspirations, the things that I enjoy, the type of lifestyle that I wanted to have, um, a college degree made sense. I very much enjoyed engineering, and it was something that I wanted to dig into more. I wanted to have a deeper understanding of how things work. And so college made sense for me. But I know a lot of folks who one of my closest friends from high school lives an amazing life, loves his life, enjoys it. He works in a restaurant in Las Vegas, uh, and will probably never finish college. And it's totally fine for him. It works. There's no detriment to his life because of it. And so for that reason, I I wish there was more of a focus on people taking into account what are your real talents for one. Where can you add? How can you add value? How do you see yourself adding value to the world? But also, what do you really enjoy? What fulfills you the most? And your awareness around those two questions or those two thoughts should help you decide whether or not college is for you. But I don't think by default everybody needs to go to college.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much on the same point of view as you. Like, it's great to go. It's a great achievement. It does open up certain doors, and obviously, if you want to be a doctor or lawyer, you don't really have much alternative to go. But if you want to do other things, like you're saying, if you want to pick up a trade, so I think the issue is there's so much. negativity around being an electrician, or anything manual, like being a builder. But then I know electricians, I know builders that earn a good amount of money. They earn more or as much as someone who has a degree and that's an engineer, for example. And on
Yep.
top of that, they have a skill that they can use guaranteed in their life multiple times. Because the thing is, you could be a programmer, and if you never make your own app or start your own business or do anything like that, chances are you're probably never going to need or utilize programming in your house. But if you're an electrician, you're going to need to do something with the electrics at some point. If you're a builder, you might want to do an extension or fix a wall. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. You'll save money, so that then there's like kind of extra money earned by because you're saving it. You've also be able to do it without relying on someone, and you can do it, on your own time as well. So I think as a society, we need to make sure people are aware there's alternatives, and even alternatives for careers that are typically thought as university based. Like being a programmer, for example, because I did programming at university, but I understand and I've seen people where they never went to uni or they never went to uni for programming, and they get a career in programming, and they
Yep.
get a job, and they get just as high as a salary as if somebody graduated with a good degree. So there's this, again, I don't know the exact reason why it's perpetuated throughout the media and throughout society, but there's definitely a lot of money, that gets thrown around with loans and books and all these other stuff. So I think there's probably an element there. Because in America, how much is a typical college degree now?
Shoot, at probably 20,000 or more.
Is that a year? I'm guessing
Yeah. Let's
that
see.
must be, yeah.
I think mine was something like mine was something like 80,000, 60,000 a year. I think the number was.
Well,
Uh,
yours was $60,000 a year.
yeah, but I also went to, like, I know Carnegie Mellon is a really expensive school. There's
Okay, yeah,
there's there's much cheaper options to go to. Uh,
yeah.
I
But
think
ideally, everyone should go to the best that they can, go to. So, like, it's a shame if somebody had the skills to go to Carnegie, but then they see the price and they're like, I don't want to go, and as a result, they have to go to some, local college that's
yeah.
nowhere near as good.
So college, what college does is it ultimately says, hey, what skill do you want to become an expert in? We'll help you. And so it's such that, like, when you leave college, you're supposed to have a skill that's marketable, a skill that you can go and add value to the world somewhere. The reason why college is stressed as hard as it is because I know in the U.S., uh, high school isn't designed to help you develop your own personal gift, if that makes sense. Like, there's
Yeah,
no, there's nothing to help you explore what specific skill what specific skill should you study that enables you to also use the natural gifts and talents that you were born with, right? That's not a question that high school helps you to answer, such that when you graduate high school, it's a coin toss on whether or not you actually have any kind of marketable skill, any way to add value. And most people don't have the lived experiences in high school to really be able to say, hey, I'm gonna go out and be a jewelry designer. I'm gonna go out and make toys. I'm gonna go out and design blah 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 blah, or I'm gonna go work here. Most people don't have that wherewithal. Um, so yeah, I think that's partially why college is pushed so hard, and I think college ultimately, in a way, it's a cheat code. It does make finding success easier, uh,
mm,
because there's a bit of a framework for you to be able to explore. Oh, this works for me. Oh, this doesn't work for me. It also allows you regularly have to deal with the pressure of taking exams, of being tested, of having to show up. Whereas in everyday life, it's much easier to oh, I don't want to take this test today, and you avoid it for 6 months. Like it's much easier to go long spans of time without really having to evolve. And so like that's another way of explaining the benefit of college is the framework of college kind of pushes you to evolve in a way that might not happen if you don't have college.
Oh yeah, that structure and the fact that you can go to college, university, and spend 3, 4 years, possibly more if you're doing like a medicine, medical degree or some other degree with like masters and PhD, like 3, 4 years, and you focus on a particular topic. So let's say programming, for example, and because at school you have so many different subjects that you're doing, so you don't really know. You haven't really explored one in any capacity. So you choose this particular one, let's say programming, and then within that you'll have all sorts of stuff. You'll probably touch a bit on web development, you touch a bit on mobile, a bit on the theory and all this stuff, and then you realize, okay, I really like mobile. I'm
Yeah.
not loving web, not loving the theory, but I'm really loving mobile. So you dive deeper into that, and it's accepted within society for you to be 3, 4 years without any particular aim and direction, and to kind of find your way. But if somebody said, I'm gonna finish school for 3 to 4 years, I'm gonna live at home with my parents, rent free, and basically no cost at all, maybe get like a weekend job, just have a bit of money, but
Yeah.
generally virtually no cost. And for 3, 4 years, I'm gonna, I want to do coding, but I'm not too sure how I want to do it, but I'm gonna explore it. People, that would not wash with a lot of people for very long. They would say, "Oh, Billy over there? He's just acting like a bum. He's just sitting at home playing video games, or he's just on his computer." Whereas if he had gone to university, they'd be like, "Oh, did you hear? Billy going to university. He's doing programming there." Like the actual, like the way they talk about it will be totally different. And I think that's a problem as well, where the only way you can kind of experiment when you don't have much money is especially in an accepted way, because that's a huge part for us as humans, is to be accepted and to have the sort of not have people constantly on your back, whether it's parents, with friends, family, spouse, potentially kids if you're a little older. It is college and university, and because of that, people are like, I'll go to college, I'll go to university, because for a few years I can basically have no direction in any major way, but find my direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was for me. It was really important for me. I wanted to go to college as far away from home as possible. Uh, not, yeah, I absolutely loved home, but I also kind of enjoyed the pressure of being alone and having to figure it out. Uh, I enjoyed the pressure of not being able to, like, not having the option to just quit and run to mommy. And that pressure alone, like, really grew me, really helped me to define who I am as a person, what I wanted out of life. And that was a just the added direction that I felt from that experience has served me really well.
Oh yeah, when you're at university, like because I moved away as well. It's only about an hour and a quarter away, but it wasn't near enough that at a drop of a hat that I could pop round. And I didn't have a car as well, so like there was that factor. It would easily be a 2+ hour journey if I was taking train, and then there was the money factor. So yeah, I remember probably a few weeks, if that, into me starting university, I was sitting there. It was probably about 11 p.m. And I remember thinking, I think I wanted a bowl of cereal. I didn't have any milk. And I remember thinking, oh, I don't have any milk. I can't, there's no one that I can call. And then I remember just thinking, there's no one here to tell me I can't go out and grab milk. So I remember, putting my, clothes on, some clothes that I can wear outside. I remember walking to the, shop that was still open, and it was dark. Obviously, there was a few lights on. I felt safe, but it just felt weird because it's just quiet.
Yeah.
I remember almost thinking, am I going to get a phone call off my mom and dad somehow as if they have a drone watching me? But I got there, got the milk, got home, and I was like, I just did that. And it was obviously that teaches you a lot. about life and how to live life. And it's a crazy thing that you just can't get if you just live at home, or you have, like you're saying, mommy to bail you out, or somebody nearby to bail you out. And it's partly also the fact that if you step out, nobody's going to recognize you. So nobody's going to be like, oh, he was out at 11 p.m., even though you might have just gone to the store to grab something to drink, or some milk or some food. So like having that aspect, definitely university, even if you're not popping out late, knowing that things aren't going to get cleaned if you don't clean them. Things aren't going to get organized if you don't organize them. It's definitely a certain type of pressure that shapes a person, because you either become very lazy, and you see that all the time. I'm sure you saw it at Carnegie, where you saw people, they had like pizza boxes stacked to the ceiling, beer cans, soda cans, whatever. But then you saw people that were more organized, because you was left to literally be you. There's no one saying, do this, do that. And if you didn't do it, because at home your mom would just do it, or she'll make you do it.
I have two sons. They're 2 and 4, and our previous nanny just moved to a different city to go to a different university. So she's been telling us about her new roommates, and she talks about how one of her new roommates literally asked somebody to teach her how to wash dishes. Which just blows my mind that there's such a person that exists that can graduate high school and literally not know how to wash dishes, not know how to wash their own clothes. Those people exist, and it's not until in my experience, college exposed me to a lot of personalities, a lot of ways of thinking that I don't know I would have believed existed otherwise. And even if I believed they existed, just not being exposed to them, I wouldn't have been able to appreciate them. I wouldn't have been able to really consider those perspectives if I hadn't actually witnessed them in college.
Yeah, and being there when you're talking to someone, you disagree with them, and then not having your friends and family to, back you up. Like, you say something, right or wrong, and somebody disagrees with you, and it's just you and them. And you have to stand by what you say. Like that's a big thing as well. Because I remember there were certain times at university, I said stuff to friends, and certain stuff was wrong, certain stuff was they didn't know. But either way, it was like they questioned it, and then it's just like, oh, what do you do now? Because they didn't take it at face value, and you have to defend yourself. You have to justify it. That's a huge thing, and that's a skill that if you don't live away, whether it's at university or college, or whether that's just going away in general, you struggle to get. And then when you go into the workplace, you're gonna get a lot of different opinions, and there's gonna be no teacher to mediate you and say, both of you shut up.
Yeah.
Okay, so afterwards, you were a product engineer at SharkNinja. What did that involve, and what did you do there?
God, I hated that company. I literally can't say anything good about the entirety of that company. My role was, in a nutshell, I would take the U.S. versions of products and study international compliance laws as a means of figuring out how to redesign the U.S. products so that they could be sold in international markets. So, like the UK, for example, has some of the most ridiculous rules around like requirements for blender, like food blender safety. And so, like, it was my job to figure out what's the cheapest way for us to modify a design so that it could be sold in more countries.
Okay. I mean, was it the work itself you didn't enjoy, or was it the actual company and the environment?
The company and the environment. I've only done project management. SharkNinja was actually my second job. I did I worked at a company called Four Moms before that, making robotic baby products. Loved it. Doing very similar work. Um, Trying to figure out, like, my job then was figuring out, can I take the existing product, and I would take existing products and figure out how to produce them for cheaper. And that was really fun. How can we make these like baby playpens cheaper and lighter? That was awesome. Also, how can we grow the market? Like, again, internationalizing products to be sold in more places. So when I got to SharkNinja, the work itself, like, I switched from baby products to kitchen products. So that was new, but the work itself was the same. The environment at SharkNinja, though, was just not great. Um,
Okay.
there was, yeah, just not great. That, I mean, I've never, upon many things I could say. One thing I can say is, like, very strongly, is I've never seen another institution be so disrespectful of people's time. Um, in,
Okay.
ter- in terms of, like, my previous manager would he scheduled an 8 a.m. meeting for every single day, and would literally never be on time. Like, he would schedule eight o'clock meeting, and if you weren't in his office at 8 o'clock, he would call you multiple times, like, call you back to back to back. Hey, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? You go to his office, 8:03. Oh, wait, 1 second. I need to step out, and he would literally leave you sitting in his office for like 15, 20 minutes, and expect you to wait. Um, and that's just one person, but it was like there was every day there was just an egregious amount of disrespect for people's time, just overall disrespectful of people's humanity. Yeah, nothing good to say about that company.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was at university, I had a placement year from 2012 to 2013, and I was at a company called Accenture, so, a really big company, and I hated it there as well. It's just like the way it wasn't exactly the same, but it's just they just each person there just felt they was more important than they actually were.
Yep.
Instead of just saying, I'm coming to work, I'm getting some money, I'm doing a job, and at the end there was charging clients, and the clients were stupid to pay it just because it was a big company. Like, sometimes they pay IBM, a shit ton of money just because it's a big company, and they were paying a lot of money for stuff. The stuff wasn't that good, and what made it even worse is when we're, as developers, as creators, we're creating the stuff, but because we can't, create it as good as just two or three of us could, even though there's hundreds of people on there, just because of the poor decisions that are made, whether it's the tools that they use or the approach they take,
Yeah.
and you have no flexibility. And then, like, I remember because the working time in the UK generally is 9 to 5. Obviously, it depends on the job. But I remember it was 9 to 5, and I remember on the first, because it was different projects at that particular company. And the second project I had, the manager said to me on the first day, "It's 9 to 5, but we expect everyone here from 8 to 6." And I was just like, I was only there for a year because they only had a 1 year placement. It's just that mentality of, it's like, okay, you ain't paying me more. You're not giving me any extra leeway, any extra, holidays as a result. So you're saying we have a contract for 9 to 5, but I have to be 8 to 6. And I remember literally there's so many people that would not leave, even though they even weren't doing anything or they wanted to leave, to at least 6 had hit, because they knew that if they was seen leaving, especially people that was there permanently. I was there for a year. I left at 5 or half 5. For at the end of the day, I just need to get through this year. I
Yeah.
don't need anything else out of it. I just need the experience. I just need it on my CV. Other than that, I don't need it. And yeah, there were people literally just sitting there for up to like half 5, 6, even beyond. Like, I saw people up to 7 o'clock sometimes when I was working late the odd day, and it was crazy. It was insane. Even though we would sometimes see the manager leave at 5:30, and they knew that there will probably be someone that would say that this particular individual didn't stay till 6, and as a result, they would just stay. And it's just that mentality of, you know, it's like a dictatorship. It's a fearful mentality, and as a result, because a few people do it, other people do it to get higher as well. They become engrossed in that sort of world, and they just become just like those people. And I remember there was one guy there. He was a manager, pretty high up, but he wasn't like super high up. I remember there were stories about, because he had assistants, about assistants that would go out of his office crying because of the way he shouted at them for no reason, and it was considered normal. Like, higher ups knew about it, and he was just like, "Yeah, that's just the guy that can't keep assistants because he's so mean."
It's not even at SharkNinja. It wasn't even assistants. Like there was a whole culture. There was a whole culture of yelling. That it never came up in my meet. Nobody ever yelled at me, but I saw people get yelled at. I saw people come out of meetings crying after getting yelled at. I hated how the company. My whole job was to internationalize products, and I would go into meetings and say, "Hey, this design change will cost the company $5,000, but we'll make that back. We'll make that back in a month, and then within 3 months we'll have $30,000 profit, something like that, right?" $5,000 is actually a big number. A lot of times I would come in and say, "Hey, we can make this change for $1,000, for $300." That was this one instance that I'm thinking of. My manager would be like, "No, I don't think that's a good. I don't think we should do that. I don't think it's worth it." Like for no reason, despite me having done all the validation to prove it, yada yada yada. "Oh, I don't think we should do that. Instead, Evan, can you go help pick up this 3D model from the machine shop, or can you submit this 3D model to be produced at the machine shop?" And so there were times where I was saying, "Hey, can I have X amount of dollars to do my job?" My boss would say, "No. Instead, can you go make this model?" I'd be making models, like prototypes that would literally never even be reviewed, would never get looked at, would literally go from my hands to a desk straight to the trash, that were costing more money than my own initiatives, and it was just a totally crazy place to work. I'm very, whereas you literally, I'm telling you right now, you couldn't pay me to say anything good about SharkNinja. Like I would refuse money. I am willing to put relationships at risk in my refusal to say anything good about SharkNinja. That said, though, I love Apple. I love Apple.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. Yeah, so talking about Apple, you currently work for Apple as a engineering project manager. Yeah. What was before we talk about what you do? What was the interview process like for Apple? Because it's one of the FANG, or I guess MANG they would call it now. One of those big companies. So what's it like working for? What's the interview process like?
The interview process varies greatly. It almost seems like every person has a slightly different experience. Mine was a bit extreme because I ended up interviewing for multiple teams. So it was several phone screens, with a couple with several different teams. After I had a couple teams that were interested in kind of going to the next stage of interviewing, they flew me out. I interviewed with two teams, and so I spent a full day with the first team, a full day with the second team, and I think each day had I met with 10 different people. So yeah, it's a little bit rigorous, largely because Apple pays well. Two, their relocation and kind of startup their sign-on bonuses, the resource that they give you very early, is pretty crazy. Um, they invest heavily in you very quickly, and kind of, in my eyes, they don't want to make that investment in somebody who's not gonna show up and stay for an extended period of time. Like if you take all the money, you only stay for 6 months. Like Apple just got robbed, and so their interview process it can be pretty extensive, just to really vet that the people who show up on day one are people who are gonna be there for a while.
Yeah, so they're good and they also stay. Yeah, because there's that issue. You get people that are good, they go and work for a company, but then they leave 6, 12 months later. They obviously want people that are lifers, that are there for a decade, that
Yeah,
can or more, that can take control. Start take control of a particular project, a particular product, and also know the team and know the whole system of working. So, like that interview process, how long was it from when you applied to the actual offer date? And were there periods of time where you just didn't hear from them for ages?
my man, my interview my whole trip, my whole journey to Apple is kind of ridiculous. Um, I got an interview without actually applying. I had I'd applied several times to Apple over the years. Um, like never got a call back. I my she's my wife now, but at the time she was just my when we were just dating. I was living in Boston. My girlfriend then was living in California. I flew out to visit her, met her father for the first time. We hit it off really well. Her father he managed a repair center at a car dealership. Um, and after he and I met for the first time, he texted me after. He was like, "Hey, this really important guy from Apple will be in the office. Will be coming to my dealership next week. Would you like me to give him your resume?" Absolutely. And so he, my father, now he's my father-in-law. My father-in-law passed over my resume. I get an interview. I interviewed for the completely wrong position. Um, and the interview. I have a mechanical engineering degree, but I've never actually had to do CAD for work. I've never truly functioned as a mechanical engineer in a professional setting. Uh, and so Apple is absolutely not like it's not the easiest place to learn how to be a mechanical engineer, if you're not like fresh out of college. And so I'm sitting in this interview for a mechanical engineer position, knowing I'm bombing every question, knowing this is not going well. I know they're not going to hire me after this interview, but I did it anyway. The recruiter calls and says, "Hey, yeah, the team decided to pass, um, but I'll give you a resume to another recruiter that recruits for roles that are more in your wheelhouse." Um, I was already doing project management at that time, so he passed. He claimed to have passed my resume off to somebody else who recruited for project management. I didn't hear anything for a solid month, and I thought for sure I I was so sure that I wasn't going to get a job at Apple. I was a week away from sending in a deposit to go back to school. A recruiter calls. Like, when I say I was a week away, I'm saying I was literally waiting for my next paycheck to to give this deposit. A recruiter from Apple calls and is like, "Hey, I actually don't know how I got your resume, but I think you'd be a perfect fit for this role if you're interested." And the rest is history. From that point on, I think it was about a month between that first call and me accepting an offer. It might have been shorter than that, but it was around that amount of time.
Okay. And at Apple, what do you do? And specifically, right now, and how do you interact with, developers and designers in the team?
So I'm the middleman between Apple. and the factories overseas that produce our products. Um, and so I help facilitate the product development process. So kind of the way I explain it, if you want to, before you can put a product on shelves, you got to build something, you got to test something, you got to iterate a couple times, and then finally you have a qualified design. My job is I come in at the beginning of a product, beginning of a project. Apple says, Evan, we want to ship this product. We want this product to be on shelves December 2020. It's my job to figure out all the major milestones that the engineers and everybody need to do to enable us to actually start production in time to hit the shelves by December 2020. Um, and so I'm technically not in charge of anybody, but it's my job to tell the engineers, hey, I need you to send your engineering drawings to the factories by this date. I'm the one that's telling the factories, hey, build 1,000 of this, build 100 of these, blah 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 blah. I need you to deliver all of this stuff by this date. Um, I set up that whole plan at the beginning of a program, and then when you get into it, things go wrong. Engineers miss their deadlines. Factories have mishaps. I think a more comical one that I've had is like there was a typhoon. There was a typhoon and a truck got washed away and like some product got destroyed and we had to remake it. Like when those moments come up, uh, it's my job to figure out what's the best plan of action to respond. What can we do? What kind of compromises can we make? What design changes? What pivots can we do to still enable us to have a product on the shelf by the target ship date? I can't be
Okay.
I can be much more specific than that, but that's what I do.
Yeah. And do you ever have to, because like you're saying, if let's say Apple say they want it, in December on the shelves, do you ever have to make the decision whilst you're in the middle, or your team in the middle of creating the product, that okay, we need to deliver by December, some features are going to have to be cut, we need to cut this and this? If so, how does that sort of go down when you're talking to engineers saying, this thing that you've worked on, we're going to have to cut it from at least the initial release?
Oh, absolutely. I think everybody knows Apple is gonna release a new iPhone. Apple is gonna
Mm-hmm.
release a new blah 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 every year. It happens, um, and that that kind of regularity is something that you don't show up at Apple and not know that already. Uh, and so with that in mind, people have this understanding. You might work on something for 6 months, but if it doesn't pan out, and if it's not to Apple quality when mass production starts, then we're not going to ship it. And so it's kind of a cultural thing where you're just expected to don't be too in love with your project because it might get canceled. It might it might get delayed. It might not come out exactly as you want. And so people don't seem to get most people don't get too upset if their one feature doesn't pan out exactly as planned. Um, how does it actually pan out? One thing the toughest part about Apple is also one thing that I enjoy the most, and that is essentially every single decision that is made about a product has to be based on data, has to be based on some degree of research, and so such that you can't say no to a feature. You can't say no to why you can't say something is impossible literally unless you can prove it definitively. And so a lot of times for myself, uh, the most of the parts that I manage are metal, and so a lot of it comes down to: are we going to be able to produce this part? Can we make the tools? Can we qualify the tools? Can we get the material in time for this to all pan out? And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no. But until I can explain to you, here's when here's when step one is done, here's when step two is done, here's when step three needs to be done, but here's why that's impossible. Like until I can prove to you very clearly why something can't be accomplished, then we still try it. We still put resource towards we still put resource towards making it possible.
Okay. And so just talking about features that get cut, generally Apple, let's say the iPhone, for example, has the reputation that, it doesn't get the latest features straight away. And it gets them, let's say, sometimes a few years later. And I would say a lot of time when they do get it, they might be minimal, but they work really well. Some of those features that Apple, let's say the iPhone might not get, but let's say an Android phone has it for a few years, are some of those features just missed because they're just not ready yet to their standards, and they have to be missed for this particular launch?
We don't compare ourselves to anybody else. I think there's I I'm coming up on 5 years at Apple. I've never been in a discussion where somebody's like, "Hey, well, but an Android phone can do this, or a Microsoft computer can do this." That doesn't matter. We don't compare about that stuff. We don't care about that kind of stuff. It's more of a matter of, does this, like, will this product meet Apple standards if it doesn't have this feature? Yes or no. That's one way of looking at it. Or a different way is, uh, can we develop this feature enough between now and the launch date? Can we develop this feature enough for it to meet Apple's requirements? Yes or no. If the answer is no, then we scrap it. Then we don't do it.
Okay.
And that's really it. But I've never I've never been in a meeting where somebody was like, well, Android, like, no. We know our hardware, our software, like, our products are superior. Is like the mentality that we have at Apple.
Okay. And so, in a few points, how would you describe Apple's standards? Because you mentioned multiple times, it needs to meet Apple standards, but how would you describe that in a few concise points?
I can't answer that question. I don't think. Part of it is I don't know how to generalize it enough. But also, even if I didn't generalize it, if I talk to you about how insane, if I talk to you about the insane process that goes through qualifying, like, our keyboards, like the amount of detail and attention that goes into literally how far does every button on the keyboard move, how does every key feel when you start pressing it, how does it feel when you stop pressing it? Like, every detail of every product is insanely uh, kind of regulated. And so, what is the Apple standard is crazy. It's very intense. It's high. It's so high that most other companies could never achieve it. But the specifics of that is hard to explain. I can't explain that.
Okay. And so, the Apple standards, is it a lot of testing, would you say? So obviously you got to make the product, or some early prototype of it, but then is a lot of the process testing. 'Cause some companies will be like, we made it, do a bit of testing. Oh, this button does this button does this. But what you're saying, it sounds like there's a lot of testing to make sure every little thing is just connecting just the right way.
There is an insane amount of testing. That's
Okay.
that's that's as extensive as I can answer that question. There is
Yeah.
an insane amount of testing that goes into everything.
Yeah. And so with Apple products, they obviously have a fan base. A lot of people love them, but occasionally Apple will either bring out a product or a feature of a product that is pretty widely hated. So I'm going to talk about the Touch Bar and on the MacBooks, and again on the MacBooks a few years ago when they updated the keyboard and the keys didn't have as much travel. Did they call them the butterfly keys, or I don't know if that was the one that came after? Whatever they called it, it had less travel. So how do you, from your experience, explain how something like that gets through, but that's generally not liked? Whereas, there's plenty of things that Apple does, and even people that don't like Apple will be like, okay, that is of high quality. I might not like it, but it's of high quality. Like, how do you explain when things get through?
As amazing as Apple is, we don't get it right every time.
Mm.
I think that's part of it. Um, another part of it is sometimes society is just not ready for the technology that's being released. An easier example of that to see is like Google Glass.
Mm.
Uh, in the I feel like I was still living in Pittsburgh and I saw some people. I saw people walk around with pretty serious prototypes of Google Glasses in like 2014, 2015. But that's an example where like wearables wasn't a big enough thing yet. Like society just wasn't familiar enough with that idea that it was just too far ahead of its time. And I think some of the products like the touch bar and the keyboard, I don't think there was enough of an ecosystem for that to be continued. But like I said before, Apple's not perfect. We just don't get it right 100% of the time.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think partly sometimes, you might just be too early, not in terms of, people accepting it, and there's definitely a case for that. Also technology wise. Because when they released the touch bar, I love the idea of it, that it was like a screen that you could, because otherwise a keyboard is so fixed. Like there's nothing that you can change. Because I have thought about it for a long time, and you can get some streaming decks, but why don't keys have like their own screen? And they can change depending on the application I'm playing. Or certain
Yeah,
keys highlight. Let's say if I'm playing a game or doing Photoshop or doing coding, certain keys I'll press more. And but I feel like with the touch bar, what I really wanted was that, but then the ability for the touch bar to physically morph in kind of into physical keys, so I could still touch, I mean press them without having to look at them.
yep,
So have that flexibility of a screen, but have the sort of the visceral feel that a keyboard gives you. So
yep,
yes, sometimes the tech's just not there, and they're early, and like you said, sometimes people aren't ready for it, and they want something different.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay. And so, as a man of color, how has it been at a big company like Apple? Have there ever been any moments where you felt like you were treated differently? Be that good or bad moments.
mm, when it comes to this subject again, Apple, and I recognize my story is unique, but Apple has shown up in a way that I never ever would have expected any company to. Uh, have there been kind of one off moments where an individual might have said something uncomfortable? Sure, yeah, but as a whole, Apple has supported. I'm very active in the diversity, equity, inclusion space. I do a lot of activism. Most of it is within Apple, but I'm also kind of moving more into the public realm as well. Um, Apple has done nothing but help support and grow my anti racism work in a really beautiful way. So I think about like for me, it was a really pivotal moment was when George Floyd was murdered in 2020. Um, Without question, if I had been a Shark Ninja in 2020, I don't know that I would have been able to step foot in an office again. Like I don't know that I would have ever been able to go back to work after George Floyd was killed, just because that environment was so overwhelmingly white, but also like aside from race, just thinking about cultures and the way people treat each other, they were also just so not inclusive that I don't think I could have ever step foot in there again. Um, Whereas Apple, after George Floyd was killed, that's what really sparked my activism. And again, Apple has done nothing but help amplify my efforts in that area.
Okay. And on the subject of your activist work, you have a really emotional and inspiring video called "Let's Talk About Race." For anyone that hasn't seen it, I'll put a link in the description. And that'll be the case for any other links that you want to share as well. I'll put that in the description. Tell the audience about the video, what it is, and the origins of it, because we've discussed it a bit off the podcast. But I want the audience to hear the
Yeah,
history behind that and what it is.
George Floyd's murder. George Floyd's murder was the first time I had to really deal with racism on a mass scale after becoming a father. And so at that time, I was really into bodybuilding. Uh, I was really into personal fitness. I was really into powerlifting, and my mentality for all of my life prior to becoming a father, even prior to becoming George Floyd, because George Floyd was what really made me revisit this thought, was I wish a racist would. Like I grew up very familiar with racism. It's been something I've had to deal with in every state, every city, every office, every school I've ever gone to. Um, and my mentality was always, I wish a racist would try me right now, because I'm ready for it. Mentally, I'm ready for it. Physically, I'm ready for it. Like, we can go step outside and have that fight. Uh, and if I lose, I lose. But I'm not gonna lose. Like, that was my thought when George Floyd was killed. My oldest son was 2, and my wife was still pregnant with our second son. And in that moment, it was like every time I looked at my child, the thought was, Evan, you can't protect him. It was no longer just, Evan, either you win the fight or you don't. It was like, Evan, if a fight happens, your son has to see that. And regardless of if you win or lose, there's no positive outcome to that. And the having to deal with fatherhood and racism absolutely crippled me. Like, the realization that I could be stolen from my son, or my son could be stolen from me, just how effectively that was exemplified by George Floyd's murder, uh, left me feeling like I physically couldn't talk, physically couldn't speak words. Um, I realized over and over my experience was largely invisible to people that weren't, like, to white people. Just black folks knew it. My sisters knew it. My black friends knew it. My black family members knew it. They understood how I felt. But my wife is white. Her family is white. Most of the people I work with are not black, and they literally couldn't understand what was happening with me. Um, I made my video. I made that video largely as a means of explaining to my wife what was going on. That's where the presentation first came from. I needed to explain to my wife, this is what's happening. I need to explain to work, this is what is happening, because day after day, as I got further and further away from George Floyd's murder, I was just growing darker and darker and darker, and it was getting harder and harder and harder to think about. So much so that I was afraid that I was going to lose everything. I was like, my marriage is at risk, my job is at risk, fatherhood is at risk, everything. If I only tell them half of the story, they'll think I'm crazy. Uh, but maybe if I tell them the whole story, maybe they'll see that I'm trying. Maybe they won't lose trust in me. Maybe I won't lose my job. Maybe my wife won't think I'm crazy or think I'm unfit. Yada yada. Maybe if I tell them the whole story, maybe something good will come from it. And so that's where the presentation first came from. I gave it. I gave it one time at work to the six people, the 7 people that I worked most closely with, my manager plus another 6 people. Didn't know what to title such a meeting. What do you call a meeting given what I was about to tell these people? I had no idea. I didn't want to give it some foo-foo name that kind of distracted from my message. And so I just called it "Let's Talk About Race." Um, they showed up. They listened. I get to the end of the presentation. There's a slide that says the end. There's a few. This is over WebEx. There's a few muddled thank yous, and I immediately slam my computer, thinking, "Holy crap! You just lost your job." The story that I tell is detailing the moment by moment thoughts and emotions from the first week of having to digest George Floyd's murder. Um, when I told that story, the the primary response I got was, "Holy crap, Evan! I had no idea. I had no idea that's what racism felt like. I had no idea that's what racism looked like. I had no idea that's what racism was." I have literally hundreds of comments of people saying things like, "Evan, I'm a 51-year-old white woman from New York City. I thought I knew what racism was until I listened to your story and I realized I knew nothing." Um, and so the presentation is meant to it is the best way for me to help you see that era, that moment in time through my eyes. I tell you several stories about going out with my son, trying to leave my house myself, interaction with my wife, and how all of those impacted me as a person. Um, the response from not black people is, "Evan, I had no idea." Hopefully you can't hear my kid just barged into the room now.
I can, it's fine. He
Go
wants to
back.
be on the podcast.
So the response from not black people is, "I had no idea." The response from that I usually get from black people is, "Evan, thank you for saying the words I didn't know I needed to say. Thank you for saying the words I couldn't string together myself." Um, so there's my family just came in. I completely lost my train of thought. But does that answer your question a bit?
Yeah, it does. And so, continuing with that, what specific role has Apple played in your activist work?
Mm, mm. I gave that presentation once, thinking, "Oh yeah, that's not gonna go well. Like, you just lost your job."
Mm.
And then I got a text message from somebody on the call. Um, this lady said, "Evan, there's 25 engineers that report to me that all need to hear this story. If you're willing, if you're willing to tell it again, I'll schedule the meeting." And I looked at my wife in disbelief, uh, and thought, "Hell yeah, I'll tell this story again." And so, the first presentation was for 7 people, and then I presented to 10 to 15. Word kept spreading, and it built from there. 50 people. I remember being really excited the first time I had 100 people show up for one of my presentations. It got to the point where I just agreed. I just blindly said, I'll do this presentation every Wednesday and Friday on my lunch. I did it over WebEx. This was during kind of the early COVID time, so everybody was working from home anyway. Uh, and Apple's role was really allowing me to do this work. There were leader after leader, director, vice president, senior vice president. People kept finding out about the presentation, and kept introducing me to other people, introducing me to other organizations, creating moments where I could share this story to the masses. So much so that in June, the first week of June, I presented to 7 people. I think it was August. by July, my presentations were averaging like 200 people per session, um, and I stopped counting attendees in early August after I presented to upwards of 4,000 people worldwide, like 4,000 Apple employees worldwide. And so Apple has just done nothing but help me continue to grow my audiences. Now I stopped doing the presentation live when my son was born. When my second son was born, I think he was. I think my son was born on a Tuesday, and I remember thinking like, "Dang, I don't get to do tomorrow's presentation." Uh, since I left for paternity leave, the video that you're referencing was made. And now what I do is I invite large groups. Actually, groups. It doesn't have to be a large group, but I invite groups to join me in a conversation after they've watched a video. Um, and that's the only homework. Watch the video and then come ask me whatever questions you have about it. Share your thoughts, share your experiences, ask questions you have about racism. Let's really explore this new perspective that you have. That's a workshop I've been facilitating since November of 2020. Uh, and again, Apple has done nothing but allow me to continue to have those workshops to help me grow and help publicize attendance of those workshops in a really powerful way.
Okay. I mean, it's good to hear that Apple, is supporting that, and because it would have been very easy for Apple to either silence you or to ignore you. And like you were saying, the first time you gave it, you was scared. You thought, "Oh, this is the end for me," or at least in any major way. But it
Yeah.
seems like they have, definitely supported you, which is fantastic. So, where would you like to take your activist, work? What does the next level, the next 10 years look like for you in terms of activism?
You know, that's like an impossible question for me to answer. Um, the workshop that I mentioned, I really, really, really enjoy gathering with groups of people, like watch the video and join me in a conversation. And it's one of those things where until you watch the video, you have no idea the gravity of what I'm talking about right now. Uh, it feels weird for me to acknowledge the greatness that that video is, but it's truly one of the best stories I've ever told. Um, but even then, you can't understand you can't understand the benefit the you can't understand what happens in these conversation sessions until you see one of those in person. Um, you still there? He said something about connection for a second.
I mean, I can still hear you. Okay, can you still hear me? Okay.
Yep, 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 yep.
Okay.
And so on one hand, the conversation session is scary. It's every single one of them is terrifying to me because I don't know who's in the audience. I don't know what kind of hurtful things people might say. I don't know like what kind of negative response I might get. Um, but that said, every time I finish one of these conversations, I feel like I'm a better parent. I feel like I'm more prepared to help my kids deal with race, deal with racism, deal with their identity. I'm more able to help my kids learn how to identify their authentic self and then how to show up as their authentic self wherever they go. Um, and so with that in mind, like that's my one reason for being an activist. I think I think making the world a better place is a fortunate side effect, but it's not my motivation. My motivation is trying to do whatever I can to be the best father as possible. And activism is the greatest teacher I have right now. And so I'm really open to growing my work as much as I can. But I don't know for sure what that looks like. I'm just remaining open to the opportunities as they show up.
Okay. And have you ever had a negative response at any of your events?
Mm, some yes and no. Like negative in that they weren't exactly what I expected, but they're still positive as even the negative experiences help me understand the enemy, understand the problem that I'm trying to solve. Uh, this presentation is one where, like, to date, literally thousands of people have ranted and raved about how amazing this presentation is. Uh, but one of the earlier comments I got back was from a man telling me, "Evan, you should stop listening to people like Ebro." And he listed off a couple, like, kind of famous black people. You stop listening to these folks. Instead, listen to this list. And he gave me another list of Trump's of pro Trump people. Uh, like, don't be so against Trump. Not all Trump supporters are the same. America ended its issues with racism when Rosa Parks took her stand on the bus. Like, that was this man's idea, that racism ended when with Rosa Parks decades ago, which is just totally, like, completely asinine and unbelievable. And so, on one hand, I first saw that comment, and sure enough, it made me very angry. But on the other hand, it was a very concrete, very tangible example of this is the intentional blindness. This is the accepted ignorance that I have to fight against.
Oh yeah, like when you hear people like that, you think you can't really believe that, but there's so many people, that believe stuff like that. I remember it was this is nothing to do with race. I saw a interview with Boris Johnson, who was the prime minister in the UK.
Yep.
Way before he became prime minister, but I think it was with his sister, and because their family grew up with money, so they weren't exposed to certain things. But I remember she was like, they was talking about homelessness and poverty in the UK, and she literally said, and you could tell she genuinely believed it. She was like, "There's no homelessness here. There's no poverty. Like, everyone's okay." I was like, "You
Yeah.
actually believe that?" Like, they live in London as well, and it'd be the same with, let's say, if you go to New York, you don't need to go very far to see it. It's like,
Yep.
it's a few minute walk away from wherever you are, even in the rich areas. You don't need to go far, and it's crazy that they believe that, whether it's because they just don't see it enough, or they just are told a certain point of view, and as a result they're just like, oh, they're not really poverty or racism, they're just making it up, or they're just exaggerating it, whatever the rationale is. But it's insane when you do come across people like that, whatever it is, whether it's race, whether it's poverty, whether it's a particular individual that's people don't like, but they're not as bad as people think. And the way people do sometimes think, and from what I've seen, America does seem to be more sort of exaggerated, but there's definitely a lot of people that are you know have more extreme views. Yeah,
There's
I mean, even more than the UK.
it's very easy to find places where, like, I'll start that over. I've met a lot of folks who are like, "Evan, I'm not intentionally racist. It just so happens that as a child, I never saw black people in the city I grew up in. In high school, I didn't go to, like, I never saw black students in class. In college, I didn't see black students in class. I go to work, I don't see black people. I'm not racist, but it just so happens that I live in a neighborhood now where there are no black people. And in such an environment, it's very easy for people to go their whole lives never experiencing racism, and to assume that their life is representative of everybody else's.
Mm.
And for those people, for that person in particular, the only conversations they have about race or racism are all focused around, like, the most egregious examples of racism. Um, and it is typically a conversation that is hurtful, that is attacking. Um, And what makes my presentation different is even if you don't even if you don't know me, even if you don't agree with the words that I'm saying, it's the story is told in a way that you can still understand the perspective of somebody else's life. Like it's hard to watch this presentation and not to feel my pain, not to understand how real and legitimate this is for my life. And just that one glimpse is enough to change people a lot of times. I
Like,
like to. I hear people talk about Europe, how easy it is to travel from one country to another, yada yada yada, and to hear different languages. It's just not the same in the U.S. And that is beneficial to things like to concepts like racism.
oh yeah, like it definitely makes a country seem more united and one when there's it is obviously you have state laws, but there's one overall legal system. That everyone speaks English pretty much. So yeah, it does. It's easier to make that generalization that everything that I've experienced is just generally the way it is, at least in America, if not the whole world.
Yeah,
Because it's a lot easier for me to make the generalization that everything in that I've experienced in the UK, even though I know that might not be true, is the UK as a as a whole. But then France and Germany and Switzerland, they're different, even though they may not be any more different than London and Birmingham, for example
yep,
in certain aspects. But it's very easy to say, oh, it's all the same here. The racism is either high or low, even though it depends on the area, obviously where you go. And that's the same with any topic. So yeah, I think that's a good point that you make, where it is very easy for people, and it's when you think of it like that, that people are obviously the product of their environment. It's we any of us could have easily been horrible or racist given the right environment. Even though we aren't white, we could easily be heavily racist towards white people or towards each other, and it hasn't happened. But unfortunately, they've grown up in that environment where it has. Especially when you do meet, let's say, white people that aren't racist at all, and they say they've been a bit more exposed to it, or their family dynamic was different. It's kind of like you hate them in one regard, but then you're like, it's it's not inherently them, but it's become them. So it's like it is them now because they're like 20, 30, 40 years old. And
yeah,
are they going to change? It's probably unlikely they're going to do a complete 180. But then if the grow the circumstances were different, they probably would have been a person that you would like to hang out with on the weekend. So
yeah.
that's a very difficult one when you really do sit back and just think about it from that perspective of how different things could be.
The crazy part is America. Like a lot of folks are quick to deny that racism exists, and like to think that it was completely washed away in the 70s and 80s. But people forget, like the same folks who were enforcing racist laws in the 50s and 60s are literally still alive. Like
Mm.
my mom, for example, went to segregated schools. Like she remembers when schools were desegregated, and that was an awful period in her life. And it's just so crazy to think that just because desegregation is illegal now, it's crazy to think that the harm that legal segregation caused has gone away, has been healed, because the folks who are traumatized by those practices as kids are still alive, still raising kids, still being grandparents. And so like refusing you asked, have I received a negative, any kind of negative feedback to my presentation? The worst the worst feedback is also like almost the easiest to miss. Just the other day I did a conversation session with this public group, and they posted on LinkedIn, and it got a lot of likes or whatever. Um, and this man commented. about how he's like, Morgan Freeman said we should stop talking about racism, and I tend to agree. That's essentially what this man said. Just believing that if we don't talk about racism, the problem will go away. But that's foolish. Not talking about trauma doesn't make it disappear. And as a society, we're still dealing with the trauma of America's racist past, and not talking about it is only how you end up with people as divisive and as hurtful as Trump sitting in the most powerful seat in America.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's a crazy one when you do get people like that. Well, yeah, when they say stuff like, "Oh, you just don't talk about it," and
Yeah,
it's like, yeah,
real quick though, I need to go help with my kids. Our nanny called out today. Um, should we try to continue on another day, or what are your thoughts?
that's fine. We'll continue on another day. Just one last question, because I always like to end it with some potential advice for
Okay.
people. So what advice would you give to somebody who wants to, become an activist? And a separate question: what advice would you give to somebody who wants to work at Apple or a big company like Apple?
Personally, I think everybody should want to be an activist. And it's first start by asking yourself, what problem do you want to solve? What issue do you want to go against? And for me, that issue is racism. If you want to be an anti-racist and you don't know how, like, stop asking. Like, don't read books. Sure, you can read a book if you want to, but like I haven't read any books about how to be an activist. Instead, start by asking yourself, what has racism stolen from me? The answer to that question is how you find the conviction to stop being silent. Uh, Thinking about what has been stolen from you is how you find that the anger that helps you overcome the fear of being different, the fear of stepping out against something. Uh, and when you feel that conviction, figure out a way to use the natural gifts and talents that you already have to actually help somebody. And for me, it just so happens that I'm good with words. I'm good with telling stories. And so that's what I chose to do. I chose to use my storytelling skills as a means of finding a way to be an ally for somebody else. I found a way to use my natural talents to actually help somebody. And that's the only advice I can give to somebody is first find your conviction. Uh, if somehow I literally can't imagine my life without activism at this point, because I have so much conviction to not be silent, and that is more important to me. Like, in my mind, like, having the conviction to find an answer is more important than having the perfect answer right now, because the perfect answer changes. The perfect form of activism, the perfect form of being an ally, changes depending on the day, depending on who you're looking to help. And if you don't have the conviction to make a difference, then you won't have the energy to find the solution when you have to. So that's for your first question. Uh, if you advice for people who want to work at Apple or any similar company, just remember, you're going up against a huge number of applicants, and with that in mind, being able to have a personal referral from somebody that works at that company is a way to prevent your resume from getting lost in a stack of thousands. That's my best advice.
Best of best. Okay, that sounds good. I won't keep you any longer because I know you do need to run. Well, I would definitely love to have you on the podcast again. I've still got plenty more questions. We'll continue with them, and we can dive deeper, into what could potentially make you stand out as a candidate for a company like Apple. So I just want to thank you, everyone, for coming on the podcast, talking about your past with Carnegie Mellon, SharkNinja, company that you clearly love so much. Apple, and obviously the activist work as well. Definitely talk about that some more the next time. So again, just want to thank you very much, and really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it, and I look forward to continue this conversation.
Sounds good. Anyone that wants to hear more about what Evan is doing, there'll be links in the description, including to the Let's Talk About Race video. It's a good video, and I definitely recommend everyone to check that out. If you liked it, just give it a 5-star rating, and that will definitely help, Evan's message out. So thank you for listening, and I'll see everyone in the next FireDEV episode.